The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? If anybody's there, can you just type a question in saying you can hear? Perfect. All right, thank you. I'm just going to wait about another 20 seconds and then we're going to start with Stryd Power. If there's any questions, obviously type in your questions in there and I'll do my best to answer them. This is my second webinar. I did a yoga one, and so bear with me a little bit. With Stryd Power, we covered the basics of what it is, how it works basically, how to incorporate it into your training with QT2. It's all the basic nuts and bolts. If you want any more stuff after the webinar, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Okay. So I gave the 701. Hopefully everybody's here. If not, then they can watch the webinar on the other one. So my name's Tim Gerry, coach with QT2. I'm a level 1, also a certified yoga instructor, and I have been with QT2 since 2014. Okay, what is running with power? Basically, what running with power is, for those of you who have seen the Stryd Power Meter, it's a little clip-on that goes onto one of your shoes. It's easily charged, but what it does is most of us have power meters on our bikes, so we're used to the gauges and it's in the crank or the hub, and so we're able to utilize that information along with our heart rate training. And so Stryd is kind of on the forefront of running with power, and it's basically takes effort intensity. It's the bounce off of the ground. And so if you just read the slide, I don't want to read each slide to you. It basically takes a bunch of things in this little thin, you can't even feel it, micronism, and it sends it right to your watch. So if you have a smart watch, it goes right to it. All the information is actually downloaded onto Training Peaks as well, so you yourself can see it or your coach can see it as well. The parts that we're going to cover for Stryd are speed and form, elevation. Stryd tracks your foot through dimensional space. It records accelerations and impacts and forces, like it says at the bottom, and it goes from there. So how accurate is it? It's fairly accurate. They do laboratory tests on plate 4 sensors, so it's within 5%. So I mean, power meters are a little closer on the bike. They're down to 1-2%. So 5% isn't exactly spot on, but it's a nice extra metric to use when you're running. Sometimes as I get deeper into this, we're so concentrated on heart rate and pace that sometimes if you're running uphill or into the wind or it's in the winter and you have a lot of clothes on, it just gives you some extra data to see that you're making true progress as you go through this. Okay, and for $200, it's not very expensive. There is through them, and at the end I'll show you a discount code that you can get 15% off. So it's a nice option to try it at least, and they do give you a trial period to see if you even like it to start with. Are there any questions so far? Okay. General thoughts. As a coach and athlete, I'm data driven. I like to look at heart rate. I like to look at power. We're all on Training Peaks. We're all looking at our TSS and all those other things that are on there. To me, biking, you have all this data. You have your power. You have your heart rate. You have your cadence. And so through Stryd, it gives you that extra amount of information. And the more information you have, the better you can make a training plan, the better you can make a race plan and the better you can execute on race day. I still primarily use heart rate zones for training and racing, but again, it's an extra bounce back to something. So most of my athletes, what I do is I give them heart rate goals, but I also give them power on the bike and or pace on the run. That way, just in case, say, your heart rate monitor breaks, you'll still at least have power. Same on the run. If something goes down, your heart rate strap isn't working, then at least you'll have power as a backup, and you can bounce back and forth between the two during training and racing. In case one goes down, you have the other metric there to help you, and by putting them together, it works much better. Power has been a part of cycling forever. It's useful. I like it for certain things, and as we get deeper into it, there's reasons why I like to use power on the bike over heart rate. But again, primarily heart rate stuff. And so with running, it's similar to our biking segments. Some of our all outs where heart rate will lag behind, we're able to use this. Okay, applications. These are just a few, but running in the city or the woods where GPS isn't truly accurate. The city, a lot of stop signs, a lot of lights, a lot of tall buildings. Sometimes GPS doesn't keep track of your pacing, and heart rate kind of lags behind if there's a lot of times you have to stop. So I like it there. Running in the woods is another way. A lot of times people get so caught up in their pace, they don't want to go run in the woods because all that they really see is their pace number at the end, even though their heart rate might be where it wants it to be. But running in the woods is a great way to use the Stryd Power meter. Intervals, like I said before, where heart rate may lag behind, I love it for intervals on the track, or more importantly on the road. A lot of times I found myself, before I got this, just going to the track, so I had a consistent measure of distance and time because it was flat. And now I find myself, I'll do my intervals anywhere because I have my power. I know that I'm putting out the same power even though my pace might not be there. Okay. And that heart rate lags behind. So that's why it's important. We can dial in what a Z2 effort is based off of watts, and you can hit those without having to try to get your heart rate up in there because, like I said, it lags behind. So you can do a 2-minute Z2 fartlek run, and you know exactly where you are for the power, where you don't always necessarily know for heart rate. You can try with pace, but power is great. You can go anywhere. Pace efforts that met effect by elevation elements, wind, snow, or rain. A lot of times when I'll have athletes, they'll do a 5K or 10K practice run, or we want them to do something speed. Everybody picks the flattest semi-downhill place with a little tailwind so that they have their best pace with their heart rate. But this is like it just adds to say that you're working hard. The best analogy I can make is somebody who's on a bike climbing up Mount Washington may only be going 5 miles an hour, but they're putting out 450 watts for that hour. And somebody might be going down Mount Washington at 55 miles an hour, putting out 50 watts, who really is having a better effort and a better day and a better training cycle. So pace, like miles per hour on the bike, isn't always a true indication of what we're doing. I mean, heart rate is, but it's just, again, something that we can bounce off of it. All right, where to start? Kind of like anything, when you start, if you started with an athlete, if you've started with a coach, the first thing they're doing after a week or so is trying to dial in your heart rate zones. So you're going to do the 320 bike test. You may do a run test. You may do the 8-minute bike test to determine what your heart rate zones are. Same thing here. You'd want to do a critical power test. It's the same idea. You're going to go out there, you're going to get a baseline number, and then start to build your zones from there. So critical power is really, after you get the Stryd, that's your first step, is to do the critical power. And the great thing about Stryd, it actually has a very easy website. They have lots of charts. They're very energetic because they're a new company. And as I was going through all this stuff, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. I sent an email, and the owner actually was the person who contacted me back. Okay, how to determine it? There's 3 basic ways. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but the first one is a track workout. The first one actually is you just do a 1-hour full out, and you take your average power, which is your critical power. And again, on the website, there's a table. You can punch in your numbers, and it spits out all your zones for you. If you're working with a coach, you would take those, and I have a slide further down that how it would correlate to your QT2 or ORR or psychoformula heart rate zones. So the first one would be a straight out hour. The next one is a lap test. You're going to go to a track. You have a warm up, do a couple 800s. You're going to do a maximum effort, and you take all those different splits, and you'll come up with your critical power that way. If you don't want to go to a track, they have a different way. You can just go out and just find a nice stretch of road, and there's a 3 9-minute test. Same idea. You're going to do a warm up. You're going to do a maximum distance run for 9 minutes. It doesn't have to be on a track, and you'll get your power that way. If you've noticed all of these, there's a warm up, an effort, and a cool down, just like most of your workouts should have. Okay, and then there's a 30-minute test that you can do. Again, I'm not going to bore you with all the specifics. They're on there. If you're doing this on your own, they're very self-explanatory. If you're doing it with a coach, just set the time up in your training police block to put this test in. I actually have someone doing one this week. And this is just kind of starts to break it down for you. You can get it from a previous 5K or 10K time with a couple calculations. It's not as accurate. So critical power is the first part. There are 4 or 5 different ways to determine your critical power, and then you would go from there just with your heart rate. This is basically what it would look like. An example of your Stryd Power zones. They break it down to easy, mediate, moderate, threshold, interval, and repeats. This is just an example of what it is. And your power for your bike and your run, they're not the same. So don't think if you are a zone 1 biker and your watts are normally between 180 and 200, it's not going to be the same correlation for the run necessarily. How do they compare? A lot of people do this heart rate test when you go out there. So they take their zones and they go through it. And then basically with QT2, all our brands, our heart rate zones compared to Stryd, you would just take your Z1 would be 80 to 86% of that critical power. Your Z2 would be 86 to 93% of your critical power. Your Z3, 93 to like 95. I have 100 here. And then you have your BSE at the bottom, which is your best sustainable effort. So if once you do your critical power, you can take your percentages and you and your coach can figure out your zones as an approximation. And it takes a little bit of time. It's another slide down the road. We'll talk about you can do a training block to really start to dial in your power zones with your heart rate zones, very much like Zwift. I'm able to, for the most part, upload Zwift workouts, and they do the percentages. And as long as the interval is long enough, the athletes get their heart rate generally into the prescribed zone for intervals on a prescribed Zwift ride in there that's uploaded through Training Peaks. And the same would be said for this. Keeping them up to date. So a little different if you're just going to train with running power. So when it comes to heart rate training, you'll do one test, and then periodically you'll do another test. I like to do one when I first get an athlete, and then another one 4 to 8 weeks after I start with them. And then it's probably another 8, 9, 10 months before I'll do another heart rate test, because it doesn't fluctuate that often after you kind of start to get it dialed in. But just like with biking power, as you get stronger, as you train more, your zones are going to change. It's the same thing if you're just going to train with power as your sole number to run by. But what you'll see, which is kind of cool, as most of you as athletes and our coaches, you can see your Z1 power on the bike, your heart rate at the end of a 3-hour bike ride is 125 beats for an average, and say your watts are 200, 4 months later, your Z1 ride average 125 beats on the average, but now your watts are 215, 220. I think that's where Stryd can help athletes see the progress that they're making, feel successful through some workouts, and realize that they are getting faster. That's one of the parts that I really think Stryd can do that I know personally as an athlete. I love to see my watts go up in my heart rate zones. And when I'm doing certain exercises, certain repeats, uphill repeats, it's motivational and it's encouraging to see that your hard work that you lay down is translated into watts, which is a little bit better and more obtainable than just heart rate or miles per hour or pace. And Stryd's able to do the exact same thing for you. Again, there's a bunch of information on here. The only other thing I want to mention with this part is our ZR zone. Uh, you know, it's so important to run easy. It's and bike easy. The active recovery of the ZR is really for durability and injury prevention. Uh, that's the focal of ZR. You don't want to push the high ends of your ZR heart rate. You want the low ends. It's literally just for injury prevention and durability. On those days, you're literally just working on your connective tissue. So when you go hard the next day, you're not injuring yourself. Excuse me. Am I talking too fast? Yes, no. Okay. Following a power-based training plan, not something I would do or have my athletes do, but they do spell it out like I was just talking about. You would train with your existing heart rate, your pace zones. You would obtain your personal power zones, and then you would run in those power zones. But the idea is for them, you would have to keep retesting your power zones um, almost at the end of every training block. So about every 4 weeks, you would have to do a test to see if your power zones increased, decreased, or whatever. But if you're able to match your heart rate zones, I think it's much better to use both of the numbers, heart rate as your primary and the watts as your secondary to see the progress and to do certain interval training. Okay. Like I just said before, QT2 brands, we're predominantly heart rate based group. Um, it allows me to, I don't want to regurgitate this, but what I like it for is track workouts. Sometimes you're able to just get there and you can just literally, you can upload the app right to your watch. It has color meters for you so you can quickly look down so you're not looking at necessarily pace or heart rate zone. If you're doing some all out efforts, you can literally just see the power that you're putting out there. Hill repeats, same thing. Hill bounding even. Um, I find that myself and a couple of the athletes that I do train with power, that they go and run more elevation because they can see their power and they're not so worried about their pace. Which again, when you're running hills and you're doing it just is beneficial. They'll go run more hilly areas, trail running, and the windy days. They have the air power. It's actually kind of cool once you kind of dive into it. You can understand calm air, if you have a headwind and a tailwind, and how to run with those to gain the most out of it. So say you have a run course that's an out and back, to know where you want to expend more energy into the headwind or the tailwind, so that you're going to gain the most time out of that for yourself. So there are a couple cool little parts of that with Stryd, working with the air power, understanding headwinds and tailwinds, to make your race day better so that your overall time is lower and your pace is faster as well. So that part of Stryd is actually really cool as well. Again, I just like to bounce stuff around. Analyzing single workouts. So when they're uploaded, it goes right to Training Peaks. Very much like if you have a power meter on a bike, you have your average power, you have your normalized power. Normalized power, though, when running, is the same as average power. They just include it. On the bike, we all know that if you're not pedaling, those are zeroed out and they're not counted. So your normalized power is higher than your average power. Where in the Stryd, they're the same. And this is the part where we're going to start to get into for a little bit that can make you a better runner. They do offer a few little things that teach you how to run a little bit lighter. Not necessarily teach you. There's drills that you would have to do, but it's a number so you can work toward running faster rather than just doing form drills. So there's form power. Form power is equal to the power that's used vertically up and down, and any wasted power. So they have a calculation in there, and it kind of tells you your form, where it is, and then through plyometrics. And they're all through plyometrics, sprint drills, and doing different things. You can watch your form power increase, which basically says you're utilizing your power more effectively for forward propulsion, which makes you faster rather than up and down. Okay. It also takes into account, you can see that the lateral side to side movement. I mean, all right, hold on. Some point. Oh, I have a question. At some point, can you show us how to get the Stryd power numbers to show up on our Garmin watch? So, Greg, just send me an email through QT2. It's Tim Gerry. I'm on the website, and I'd be more than happy to connect with you on the phone. It's much easier doing it that way. I don't have a slide for that, unfortunately, so I apologize. Gretchen, you lost the sound. Does anybody else lose the sound, or am I still here? Anyone? Okay. All right. Still good. Thank you. I'm trying to keep track of the questions over to the right, and all right. So, um, Greg, we'll get in contact definitely for sure to go over that. All right. So going back to this, form power will help you with the side to side. We've all generally run behind someone and we see them go left and right and they got a little side to side motion in their stride. So just think, we all know the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So as long as we're not running side to side, the form power part of stride will help you. So that is very useful. The RSS score. So on Training Peaks, we have the TSS score. It's very similar. It compares the stress of workouts. And basically what it's helping do is the very end, what it just says, biometrically stress put on your body from running, whereas cycling is largely aerobic. It just helps keep track of how much work you've done and which direction you're headed in. It helps you track to see if your workouts are actually helping you gain fitness. Continued analyzing a single workout. And there are a few slides with analyzing single workouts. It's just important to understand the information that can be gained from it. So cadence, very much like I have a question I'll get to in a second. So cadence is great. It's important. A lot of times we track cadence when we're on the bike, and this allows us on running because there are certain things that do show that you will be a much more effective runner with cadence. Power zone breakdown, ground contact time. This is a huge one. The next three are really the three big ones that I feel help you the most become a much more effective, efficient runner by using power in this session. Okay. I had a quick question on the bike. Someone says that they use a 3-second average. Stryd, it seems to be a little bit jumpy. Is there any similar options to help stay smooth? Not at this point through Stryd. They're working very hard at making all the options that are available with the biking power meters available here to have a little bit more smoothness in their numbers. For anybody who was on power meters early on, they were way more sensitive and jumpy. Stryd's working pretty hard on this, and they love running. So they're not going to go away, and they're only going to make this a better product year in and year out, um, going forward. So if I hear anything about that, Tom, I will let you know. So ground contact time, all of these are really, if you talk with your coach, or if you're a coach or you're doing it yourself or for your athletes, it's applying the right drills, plyometric strength and speed work to help monitor over time ground contact time. The You don't want to spend ground contact time. It wants to be minimal. You want to hit and rebound off of it for a couple different reasons. Um, I always like to say to my runners, light is fast, heavy is slow. When your ground contact time is minimal and light, it means that you're having a better turnover. Generally, you're moving forward at a better clip. So you don't want to feel like you're pushing off. I always like to concentrate on lifting up my feet. It helps with my cadence. It lessens my ground contact time, and more importantly, it lessens the opportunity and chances for an injury. If you're banging on the ground hard and that creates a longer ground contact time, you're more likely to get the stress fractures, the ITB stuff, all those little stabilizer muscles. So ground contact time is a great way for you to start to measure speed, but also it's going to help you more likely be injury free. So that's why I like ground contact time. When I run with people, I'm like, just a thought is light is fast, heavy is slow, and light is always also an injury prevention. Vertical oscillation, that's how much you're going up and down. A lot of the Garmin watches kind of have that. This just adds another element to that. It just says, are you wasting your energy going up or going forward? Okay. And again, there's numbers to help you dial in to see what the perfect one is for that. And then you have leg spring stiffness. Okay. And I'm just going to read it because this is a really important one too. It's a measure of how well a runner recycles the energy applied to the ground. Dynamic mobility and biomechanics drills, along with strength training and hill repeat workouts, have been shown to improve leg stiffness and running economy. Um, I would tell you, if you're truly interested in Stryd, right here, besides the critical power, you want to start focusing on your ground contact, your vertical oscillation, and start researching leg spring stiffness. That's really where the economy of your running comes from. They have pages of really good information. I didn't want to just regurgitate it here or bore you to death with it. But if you're sincerely interested in it, this is the place to kind of start with it. During a race, I have a question. During a race, half distance or full, do you use a power bubble and don't go over a certain number, similar to on the bike? Great question. I have yet to race with the power on the run. I just got mine right after I raced Kona in October, so I haven't raced since then. I actually took it off. What I always feel, especially for my Ironman athletes, is this is a great tool for early beginning of the races for my athletes. When they get off the bike, they get through transition. You're running through town, and all the cheers are, and people tend to go too hard for miles 1, 2, and 3. I actually find that this in training, I mean, for racing, will actually help you run a little bit more controlled, um, because you'll be able to see that true power number where your heart rate might have spiked through transition, or just the adrenaline of the crowds and all that other stuff, and you just take off. I just think that in racing, it's actually going to help you run a little bit slower and controlled in the first few miles, so that you can able to maintain over the last 10 to 12 miles. As we all know, when we race Ironman, it's not about negative splitting the second half of the marathon. It's not about running faster. It's about maintaining. And if you can set a good game plan with your coach, and you're able to execute that game plan, which I'm going to talk about later, I think the benefit of having this power meter will allow you to see what you're doing, where you're at, for certain parts of the races. I have another question. During an endurance run, Will the power meters show indications of running form breakdown, such as will the power drop or increase with running form breakdown? Not yet. Their screens are getting almost weekly. They're getting more screens on there, but there. It's hard to explain here, but so the answer is yes and no. There's plenty of screens that you can go to see, and there's also basic screens where it will almost beep just like your other ones, where when you go up into power zones or you go down too low, that it will let you know that you're in and out of certain zones that you want to set up with. Um, but the form and the oscillation, all that stuff is normally when you upload after that you can see it, and it's addressed really through drills. So just so you know, the ground contact, the vertical oscillation, the leg stiffness, all these things that truly are part of it, it's drill based that you're not necessarily going to be looking at. You're going to see over a course of a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and 4 weeks moving forward through drills, where most people avoid drills because they find them pointless, because they don't see that they did something for an hour, or they don't see their pace. So a lot of people skip drills in the pool, on the bike, and the running. And I think this will give you solid numbers so you can see your ground contact time get better by doing those drills. You can see your vertical oscillation get better. You can see your LSS get better over time during that. And you can see it from run to run. So, a lot of times I have my same athletes do a similar run or a similar bike 3 weeks in a row before their rest week. And so they can see if their legs, LSS got better, if their ground contact time got better over the course of the same course, the same amount of time after the same bike rides, to see if we're making improvements. I hope that was helpful. All right. So pacing to me is the most important race. It's so important, and to me that's where Stryd helps tremendously. Hold on one second. By the way, there are never any silly questions. Do I find that shoes affect things like ground contact time, vertical oscillation? That's actually not a silly question. It's actually a great question. Something I didn't put on here. I'm a shoe snob. And so I love running shoe companies right now because they literally let you try every shoe for about 30 days and they do free shipping back and forth. And I'm super finicky with shoes that I run. Some I just naturally help my gait and I run smoother and much more efficiently. And this actually helps prove what I feel, if that makes sense. It would be interesting. I just got the new Nike ones. I have yet to wear them compared to, say, one of my long trainers. It'll be interesting to see how those numbers correlate, say, on a long run for my little bit heavier, my normal long day trainers compared to, say, my race shoes. But from shoe to shoe, they do differ a little bit. And definitely from, your heel to toe drop, it definitely affects it. So yes, the question is, it's not a silly question, and yes, shoes to me dictate your running form and economy, and Stryd helps you determine which shoe helps you run better. So it's worth, to me, trying lots of different shoes because of they allow you to send them back, free shipping back, to find the shoe that fits your foot the best, that you don't get blisters, and you now have another tool to actually show you with numbers that this shoe actually helps you run a little bit better than, say, this other shoe. Obviously, you have to run on them more than once, but it will help. I think I have all the questions answered. Okay, so if you go here with any analyze race strategy, pacing and nutrition are the key. If we've all been out there through the swim to the bike, heart rate, watts, nutrition, And now comes Stryd for the run as another data point for us to really help us dial in our race strategy uh, and execute it. The key is, if you look at the bottom, it doesn't matter what your race strategy is. It's you executing that race strategy. And as we all know, every time we race, our races always fall apart at some point. They're never perfect. But it's overcoming those little mini obstacles and having a backup plan to the backup plan. So knowing where you're going to go um, is vital. I always find the harder the course, the better I do. I find a lot of people get caught up in pace on the run, and if they see their pace dropping, mentally they fall apart. And it may be a false flat that they're running up or something else. And this, again, I haven't used it yet, but you're running up a false flat, or you're in an Ironman, or you're in a half Ironman, or anything. You see your power, you know you're maintaining. It may be a headwind, it may be a false flat that you weren't aware of. And so it keeps you mentally in the game and focused on your ultimate goal of having the best race. That's where I see one of the benefits on race day for it as well, because so many people, they'll start to see their pace drop off, and they just fall apart because they're like, oh, I'm going to have a bad race, and it's a terrible day. And so they give up, and not realizing that there's a headwind. And we've all been out there, and afterward you think back to the race, and people are like, oh my God, that it was so windy out there. And you're like, I didn't even think about that out there. I was concentrating on 10 other things. That headwind never came to effect. This is something that can help you. You can look down, your pace might not be there, but your watts are there. You're like, okay, I'm still on target. So it's very important. And all this other stuff down here, it's really something in its infancy a little bit. It's very new. The running with power is very new. The technology is only going to get better. It's pretty good right now. That 5% is a solid place to start. All the different screens that they have for your watches is really good. Everything, how it connects to your Garmin watch. I have a Garmin, so I know it connects. It's super easy. I don't have one of the Suntos or anything else. I'm assuming that it does. The way now it just connects right to Training Peaks. So as a coach, I can see my athletes that are doing it. Again, as another data point to see how they're doing some things. And then I can give them some all-out efforts and power zones. And so they don't have to feel like they have to go to the track or they have to go on this certain flat space. We can look at the run, and we can look at the power, and we can really see through every single heart rate zone their power increasing, just like on the bike. And it creates just a positive vibe with the training, with the coach athlete, with yourself heading into race day, that you're heading in the right direction, that all the hard work you're doing is helping you going forward. Okay. Are there any questions? I know I talked probably way too fast, and I know this is just a really quick overview of everything. Hold on, there's one more. Okay, great. Yeah, all the watch faces are everything that you need. You just go to Garmin Connect and you type in Stryd, and they have a bunch of different things to do. It's really awesome. They're fantastic in there. And if you email Stryd and ask for a phone call, they'll call you back in a day or two. They're really good about it. They're really trying to get this product going and out there. Again, it's in its early stages. If you don't have one already, you don't. It's the weight of it is so minimal, you don't even know it's there. You just charge it up like next to all your other devices, pop it back on your shoelaces, and you're out the next day. That you can use, if you don't, this discount, Coach Gerry, get you 15% off if you want one, or you can, if you're a coach, you can call up Stryd and get a coach discount too. But I encourage you to share this with whoever you want. I don't get any kickback from this, just so you know. This is just I called them myself months ago, and I just wanted to start using it. I wanted my athletes to start using it, and I just was looking for a place to start, and this was it. I hope I didn't miss anything. There is so much stuff. I mean, you could talk for hours about it, but I wanted to get it as a basic start. So the first thing is to get it. After that is the critical power test, and there's a number of them right on the website. That's where you go, and then you start looking at that LSS. your vertical oscillation, and your form numbers. And that's really, through drills with your coach or yourself, is going to make you a much more efficient runner, which is going to make you a faster runner for a longer period of time, which is the key, is being efficient. In an iron, any sort of distance race, everybody's the same at 10, 11, 12 miles, but the further you get into it, it's the people that were more efficient early on, that did their nutrition, that are more successful at the end of the race. And that's what this can help you do. I appreciate all of you for showing up tonight. Again, email me if you have any questions. I appreciate your time. I wish you well in your training. Stay safe. And races are going to occur at some point. It's a great opportunity to work on your weaknesses. And if you need anything, just like I said, reach out. Take care and have a great night.